None of the Chicago Bears quarterbacks have started more than 4 games in the NFL, and it's not too late for Ryan Poles to add some experience to the quarterback room to help mentor Caleb Williams.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On the show today, we look at the prospect of the Chicago Bears maybe still adding a veteran quarterback behind Caleb Williams. Not that they don't have other quarterbacks under contract, but a quarterback that maybe has seen a bit more, been around the block a bit more, and has more experience than the guys currently under contract, just to give Caleb more of a veteran presence in that quarterback room to help him through some of the situations he'll face as a rookie that maybe some of the other quarterbacks on the roster just haven't had the opportunity to see before. So we'll take a look at sort of the pros and cons of adding a veteran quarterback into the mix in this quarterback room. We'll look at some of the different free agent options that are still available, and we'll circle back to the quarterback on the roster with the most experience, Brett Rypien, and why that might just be the Bears' plan for the experienced quarterback in the room. But it's not hard to look around and see some of the options available in free agency, the big name being Ryan Tannehill, and we'll get to some of the other names as well, and say, man, the Bears could still use more of a true veteran quarterback on this roster, because behind Caleb Williams, you've got Tyson Bagent, who of course was exciting as an undrafted rookie last season and a great story, and played pretty well in 4 starts and appeared in 5 total games. The touchdown to interception ratio didn't turn out to be great, but for an undrafted rookie free agent, exceeded expectations in just about every way. He's clearly the number 2 quarterback on this depth chart, with Caleb Williams obviously, locked in at number 1. They went out and signed Brett Rypien as a free agent this offseason, someone who has a brief amount of experience with Shane Waldron and the Seattle Seahawks, and we'll talk about him a bit later on. And then Austin Reed, they signed as an undrafted rookie free agent out of Western Kentucky with a similar type of resume to Tyson Bagent, being a quarterback who played a ton in college and was super productive in college, but maybe wasn't showing a lot of the individual traits that you think a great quarterback needs to have to be great. There's a reason these guys went undrafted, despite being very, very good college quarterbacks. There's plenty to like about what the Bears have in their backup quarterback room. There's plenty of reason to be confident that, if Tyson Bagent, heaven forbid, needs to go out and play, we saw him win a couple of games last season. Maybe there's still more there to get out of Tyson Bagent. We haven't seen the best he's going to be as an NFL quarterback, and you can feel varying levels of confidence in him. I think the argument for signing a veteran backup quarterback in addition to these guys is not that, the Bears need to go out and upgrade from Tyson Bagent, that they need a better number 2 quarterback, but maybe more so a better number 3 quarterback. To me, it's not about signing this veteran QB to be a better option in case Caleb Williams gets hurt, but it's to be a more experienced voice and mentor in the quarterback room, a coach as a player on the field, to be out there for him, so that when Caleb Williams is feeling the pressure of being the starting quarterback in a city with all these expectations and something goes wrong, he could turn to a veteran quarterback who's been in the league for a decade and has either been through those types of situations themselves or has been around other quarterbacks that have been through those types of situations and has seen how these different scenarios might have played out in other teams and can lend that guidance and wisdom and experience to Caleb as he goes through this. As well as Tyson Bagent played last season, he's been in the league for a season, played 5 games, 4 starts. There's not a ton. There's some things for sure, but not a ton of like specific situations that Caleb can go to Tyson and say, man, how should I handle this? Because he hasn't been in that spot before. I mean, same with Brett Rypien. He's been in the league 5 years, I think, played for a couple of different teams, but hasn't been like playing a ton and been through a lot of those kind of situations, and has spent a lot of time on practice squads, for example, and injured reserves. I mean, it's not quite the same as a guy who's been around the NFL and has learned a bunch of different offenses and has worked with a bunch of different quarterbacks and has just seen a bunch of different things for that experience to lend to Caleb Williams. I think the downside here is that if you go out and sign a veteran quarterback who's been around the block, they're not going to want to come to Chicago and be the number 3 quarterback and just purely hold the clipboard, right? Like, especially Ryan Tannehill is the kind of the big name, but there are even some of the other lesser names too. Like, they will expect that, hey, I'm the veteran experienced quarterback here. You're signing me to come in and be the sort of leader in this room. I'm also the number 2 backup. You can still keep Tyson Bagent around, but if you're signing one of these veterans, you're almost certainly expecting them to be the number 2 and making Bagent the number 3. And that's fine. And I think that still can be worthwhile. But I think we all kind of want to see what Tyson Bagent can be and don't necessarily want to put a quarterback in the way of his development as well. And that any of these veteran quarterbacks that might come in, like I almost would feel like Tyson Bagent would still give me a better chance to win, because a lot of these veterans, we kind of know what they are and what they aren't at this point in their careers, whereas Bagent still has some of that untapped potential and volatility in there to give you a big game out of nowhere that you might not have expected, because we just have such a small sample size of Bagent that we don't know exactly what we're going to expect and what we're going to get out of him every time he's on the field. So like, there's something to be said about Bagent being a quality number 2 quarterback and not getting in the way of that with a veteran, but a veteran might be able to help Caleb Williams a little bit more off the field and from the sideline and during games while that veteran's not on the field. And prioritizing Caleb Williams' development is priority number 1, 2, and 3, and 4 and 5. I mean, across that's always got to be the most important thing. So if Caleb Williams thinks having a veteran quarterback would help him, or if the coaching staff thinks, hey, getting another veteran quarterback in here would help, I certainly think that would be worthwhile for the team and worthwhile for the quarterback and a meaningful move for Ryan Poles. Certainly, there's going to be a price that comes with that, depending on the quality of the quarterback. But there are a handful of options here of guys who I think may still end up on teams at some point for this exact reason, but maybe didn't want to participate in all of OTAs and stuff, but kind of like the veteran free agents do, have been lingering and maybe just waiting for the right opportunity on a team where there's an injury somewhere or just the right fit for them. But there's more than just a couple options here, right? It's not scraping the bottom of the barrel completely on quarterbacks. There's a few names that maybe like is too strong, but some names you wouldn't hate if the Bears brought them in as a veteran quarterback. We'll look at some of the different free agent options and who might be the right fit and whether the timing is still worthwhile to bring in a quarterback at this stage of the process. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Gametime, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. I use the Gametime app all the time. I'm actually going to a baseball game later this week, and I bought my tickets on Gametime on my phone because I can see my view from my seat right in the stadium or the field, or I guess they're both fields, aren't they? So I know exactly what I'm getting, where my view is, where my seat is, my angles to the plate and everything. And I also know exactly how much I'm going to pay, because Gametime has all-in pricing, so you don't get any added fees at the end of the checkout process that make your tickets cost way more than you thought you would. But it's not just sports, it's concerts, comedy shows, theater performances, any kind of live entertainment in your area. They've got it all on Gametime. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, you have to create an account and redeem our code, LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. We've talked a lot about the Bears, potentially signing a veteran pass rusher or a couple of defensive linemen, perhaps. The Bears have been linked to veteran offensive linemen out there. Fans have wanted to see Connor Williams come in. I've even seen really weird stories about like David Bakhtiari from the former Green Bay Packer. The Bears are one of the betting favorites to sign him. Not going to happen, but it's a weird time of year for this kind of stuff. I saw Stephon Gilmore, the Bears had pretty high odds to sign. I mean, I don't think the Bears are going to sign an offensive tackle or a cornerback in free agency. I think a defensive lineman is still coming, but a QB is also within the realm of possibility here. Like, we haven't seen a lot of concrete reporting on this, and I don't think it's necessarily something that I'm expecting to happen, but I think it's worth looking into because of the need, or not necessarily the need, but because it could provide some value to this Bears team like we just talked about, and because there are actually some decent options available, right? There's kind of both sides of the street. It's like, would it help the Bears? Yes. Are there players that would help the Bears? Yes, right? I mean, that's kind of like defensive tackle right now is a different story where it's like, would signing a defensive tackle help the Bears? Yes. Are there players out there that would help the Bears at defensive tackle? Not really. We talked about that a couple weeks ago on the podcast, but quarterback is a little bit of a different story. There are still some names to like and for varying levels of confidence in what these players might bring to the team. So we already mentioned the biggest name of the group is Ryan Tannehill. That's kind of the quarterback that every fan of a team across the league that says, "Ooh, maybe we should get a quarterback," they all would want Ryan Tannehill, right? I think the most successful of the remaining free agent quarterbacks, somehow kind of one of the younger of the remaining free agent quarterbacks, the guy with the most starting experience, the most wins, the guy who you feel like, yeah, if he went out there, you don't love Ryan Tannehill. There's a reason he's still a free agent. Things kind of flamed out in Tennessee at the end there, but like, he made a Pro Bowl before. You know, I mean, was he comeback player of the year? Maybe even 2 in that, right? Like, he's been a legitimate starting quarterback for a long time in the NFL and would be the best backup quarterback in Chicago instantly. I mean, he's better than Tyson Bagent instantly. The rest of the guys on the list, we can argue whether they're better than Tyson Bagent, but Ryan Tannehill very clearly would be. But I think as part of this process, Ryan Tannehill is waiting for an opportunity where he might get a chance to compete to start. And I don't think wouldn't be realistic to expect Ryan Tannehill to become a Chicago Bear. Most of the other names that we'll talk about could realistically, make a little bit more sense for both sides. But Tannehill is waiting for, a quarterback to get injured somewhere or a team to realize that, hey, wait a minute, we need a little bit more competition for the quarterback that we do have in here and that maybe we don't actually have our guy, Minnesota or et cetera. You know what I mean? Like, maybe we need a different veteran quarterback to lead this room or to compete in this room. And I think that's more what Tannehill is waiting for. And I also think Tannehill is waiting for a team that's going to pay him more than what the Chicago Bears would be willing to pay a backup quarterback to come into this situation. They don't need to go spend $10 million on Ryan Tannehill. I mean, I don't know what the number is, but like, whatever number he's looking for, the Bears don't need to go spend that. All these other quarterbacks could be worth veteran minimum contracts. And that's the kind of thing they're looking for. More of a coach in the quarterback room than someone who needs to be a Ryan Tannehill level quarterback. But you got other veterans out there, some familiar faces, some less to us. Brian Hoyer, former Chicago Bears legend. Matt Barkley, former Chicago Bears legend. Trevor Siemian, former Chicago Bears legend. And then guys like Blaine Gabbert and A.J. McCarron are also out there. Like, none of these guys are great quarterbacks that if you have to put them in the game, you feel super confident that Brian Hoyer, 38-year-old Brian Hoyer, however old he is not a young man anymore and hasn't been for quite some time. But none of us are confident that an old Brian Hoyer is going to come in the game and win it for you. Like, any of these non-Ryan Tannehill names, Hoyer, Gabbert, McCarron, Barkley, Siemian, like, I think I would rather play Tyson Bagent than any of them in the real, like, quarterback injury need to get someone else out there to win games. I would go with Bagent over any of them. But I also think all 5 of those other names we talked about, and then plus Ryan Tannehill, offers you so much more experience in this quarterback room for someone like Caleb Williams to be able to rely on. Like, think about Brian Hoyer. He came in the NFL in 2009. Like, I'm not great on doing quick math here, but I think he's been in the NFL for 16 years. He's 38, turns 39 in October. But I mean, the number of situations he's been in. I mean, I played for the Patriots with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, and I think that was under Josh McDaniels at that time. It might have been post McDaniels era, but then Arizona Cardinals, Cleveland Browns, Houston Texans, of course, with the Bears, back to the Patriots, was with the 49ers, with the Colts, back to the Patriots for like a third or a fourth time, and spent this last season with the Rams and played a couple of games there. Was he even on the field against the Bears in that game, if I remember correctly? Like, it's been a very strange Brian Hoyer career. Yes, he started that game against the Bears and didn't play particularly well, and Tyson Bagent beat him head-to-head in that game. But, like, it's not about Brian Hoyer being a great quarterback. It's about Brian Hoyer having learned a bunch of different offenses, worked with a bunch of great quarterbacks and a bunch of good offensive coordinators and quarterback coaches, and to be able to provide that guidance to Caleb Williams and say, hey, here's what it's like to go on a Super Bowl run. Like Brian Hoyer has a ring. He wasn't the starter in that game by any means, but like he has been on those kind of teams to be able to kind of give you an experience. Hey, this is what it was like when we were doing that in New England. Or Blaine Gabbert has 2 Super Bowl rings with, I think, one with the Bucks and one with the Chiefs now, I think, if I got that correctly. Another guy who's been around the block, 12 or so years in the NFL, played with Patrick Mahomes, played with Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan and Tom Brady and a couple other teams along the way. Like, there's real value to having that player in your quarterback room to share those experiences. Like, again, it's not about Gabbert being some kind of great quarterback, although he's about a 1-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. But Gabbert knows what it was like to be a first-round pick for a franchise that was desperate for quarterback play, and then he struggled and flamed out. But like, he can help Caleb Williams through those types of situations where you're really feeling that pressure, and you're the weight of a city and a franchise is on your shoulders, and during moments things are going to go poorly, and how do you handle those things? And to be able to go to Blaine and be like, man, what was that like for you in Jacksonville, your rookie season as a top 10 pick in the NFL, trying to come in here and be everything? And that's just not something that Tyson Bagent can give him. That's not something that Brett Rypien can give him. It's not something that Austin Reed can give him. And to an extent, like, it's not even necessarily something the coaching staff can give him directly. Like, sure, they've all seen quarterbacks and been through a lot of situations. That helps. But there's something to be said about, like, this quarterback in the quarterback, he is my teammate. We are on the same level. I don't necessarily want to go to my coach and need to, like, level with him in that exact way. Like, he's still my coach. He's still kind of my boss. There's different relationships there, but the relationship between player to coach is different than player to player. When that veteran player can kind of act like a coach, but still be one of us in the locker room. He can be out there at practice with us working. There's something about that level of camaraderie in sports when they're doing the same grind and same hustle that you are and have been in these other situations before that you're now yourself trying to deal with. I can hear the pushback of like, well, but this quarterback is getting here to start a training camp. They're going to be behind trying to catch up and learn this offense. And I think that's absolutely valid. But I also think we see many a times when midway through the season, a quarterback gets hurt and a team like the Browns signs Joe Flacco off the street. And you know what? They're learning the offense on the fly, but they figure out a way to do it and go have a bunch of success quickly because they're experienced veteran quarterbacks who have played in a bunch of offenses before. And a lot of offenses are similar in a lot of ways, and it's not as hard to pick up when you've already played in a similar kind of system elsewhere for other teams before. So I don't think it's too late for someone like Blaine Gabbert or Brian Hoyer or Matt Barkley or whatever name you want to come in and still be valuable to the backup quarterback room here in Chicago. I don't think it would take Tyson Bagent's roster spot. I think it would take Brett Rypien's roster spot on this 53. And he's the guy who I think the Bears are fully comfortable with in this veteran quarterback role. I think that's been the plan all along, and it's why we're not going to see them sign Blaine Gabbert or Brian Hoyer or Matt Barkley, or certainly not Ryan Tannehill. I think they see Brett Rypien as filling this role to a satisfactory outcome for them. I'm not sure I would agree, but I do want to go take a closer look at Brett Rypien because it's easy to forget he was one of their first free agent signings this year. There was very clearly an effort to go out and get Brett Rypien. So we'll kind of look at his career and what value he provides as this veteran quarterback, the most veteran quarterback in the room, next on Locked On Bears. Brett Rypien was perhaps the least publicized, celebrated free agent signing the Bears made this offseason. And I've always heard it as Rypien, but I think the Rams pronunciation guide says Rypien, so I'm going to try and stick with Rypien, but my brain always says Rypien because it's got the I in there in his name. But like, it's really easy to forget that like the Bears signed Brett Rypien on the third day of free agency. Right? This was not, it was a 1-year veteran minimum contract, so it wasn't like they gave him big money or guarantees or multi-year or anything. But very early in this process, the Bears said, that guy, we want him. Like before they traded for Keenan Allen, before they traded away Justin Fields. Yeah, they signed a quarterback, Brett Rypien, while they still had Justin Fields. And I remember that was some thinking, it was like, does the Brett Rypien signing have anything to do with the Justin Fields situation? Like, is that a sign of something? And it wasn't. But like, that was kind of the strange timing of like, you signed a third string type quarterback to a veteran minimum deal early in free agency. You know, like they're probably still negotiating with other players at that point. I don't have the exact timeline, but like I think like Dale Hunter might have still been a free agent at that point. And the Bears are obviously, you know, they can do more than one thing at a time, but focused in on landing this specific practice squad quarterback. Like Brett Rypien spent last season mostly on practice squads. He began like training camp was with the Los Angeles Rams with Sean McVay, and you know, under the same kind of style of system as the Seahawks and Shane Waldron. Started the season on their practice squad, gets promoted to the active roster, starts a game, loses, I think against the Packers, if I remember right. Plays a couple games for the Rams this season, demoted. I think he was waived altogether, then goes to the Seahawks practice squad with Shane Waldron, which is why he's here in Chicago. I mean, undoubtedly. Gets activated to the Seahawks active roster after a couple weeks on the practice squad. It is then, you know, put back down on the practice squad, then gets signed by the Jets off of the Seahawks practice squad. So last season goes Rams, Seahawks, Jets over the course of a season on the practice squad for two of those three teams, and then active with the Jets for a couple games, but doesn't play anything except for 2 games with the Rams. Then the Bears sign him after having just been with the Seahawks for like less than a full month. He came to their practice squad on November 10th, and he was signed to the Jets on December 5th. So less than a month with Shane Waldron, but still a month more than any other quarterback on this Bears roster has had with Shane Waldron. So he's got some familiarity with this offense. But again, a guy who was a practice squad player the last few seasons, an undrafted free agent, spent the first 4 years with the Broncos and played a little bit over that time. But it's not like he's some in-demand veteran quarterback that still has a bunch of potential that every team wants. Like, he's very clearly in the stage of bouncing around the league quite a bit. And yet, it feels like Rypien is their veteran quarterback plan here instead of any of the other free agents that they could have signed back then. There were more veteran quarterbacks available, like Jacoby Brissett or others, or the guys that are still available now. But instead, we turn to Rypien, who's played, you know, it's been now 5 seasons, entering year 6 in the NFL, played for 4 different teams, including 3 last year, but mostly a Bronco before that. Over those 5 seasons, he started 10 games. He's appeared in 10 games, has made 4 starts. 1 start last year for the Rams, 2 starts 2 years ago for the Broncos, and a start earlier in his career for the Broncos. Very much a third-string quarterback all along the way, and like kind of a, oh crap, all our quarterbacks are hurt, let's go throw Brett Rypien out there. But over the course of his career, like 168 pass attempts, 4 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, almost a 1-to-2 ratio. No, a little over a 1-to-2 ratio there, and a passer rating just under 60. Like we're 5 years into the Brett Rypien thing, and it's very clear that like he's not a great quarterback, and I wouldn't say a good quarterback. Like, I think to me, where Brett Rypien is on the Bears now, he's in the Nathan Peterman role, and he's just like a slightly better Nathan Peterman, right? Like, he's Nathan Peterman, but like didn't throw 5 interceptions in a half for the Buffalo Bills, right? Like, he's better than I would prefer it to be Brett Rypien over Nathan Peterman. Now, we spent probably too much time talking about Nathan Peterman on this podcast over the last couple seasons, given that he's a number 3 quarterback. But like, I'll take Brett Rypien over that. But I don't know that like the 10 games and 4 starts on 4 teams is the kind of experience for a third string quarterback that like really gets me feeling like, yes, that's who Caleb Williams can turn to, someone who's been there before. Because Rypien's like, he's kind of been nearby before, but like hasn't really like been there before. Like, he has the same number of starts as Tyson Bagent and only has a few more career pass attempts than Tyson Bagent. Like, essentially, Brett Rypien and Tyson Bagent have spent a very similar amount of time on NFL football fields in active game situations. He has more years and has learned more offenses and has been around more teams, and that has some value, however small it might be. But like, in terms of on the field, what defenses are trying to throw at me as a quarterback, like Rypien and Bagent have about the same amount of experience. So like, how much more value are you getting out of Rypien as this number 3 quarterback? Like, to me, I think the lack of a Brian Hoyer, Blaine Gabbert, Jacoby Brissett style of veteran quarterback, the fact that they didn't sign them is less about them thinking Brett Rypien is some sort of wise experienced veteran quarterback to mentor Caleb Williams. And I think it's more about how Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus and Shane Waldron feel about their coaching staff and the amount of coaching personnel they've invested in around Caleb. That they think, yeah, sure, would you maybe want to have a veteran quarterback in an ideal world? Sure, yeah, but you've got Shane Waldron as offensive coordinator, spending a bunch of time with Caleb Williams. You've got Thomas Brown brought in as offensive passing game coordinator after having just been an offensive coordinator for the Panthers. So you have two guys running the passing game at the higher end. Then you've got your quarterbacks coach, Kerry Joseph, who played professional quarterback, albeit mostly in the Canadian Football League, but very successfully in the Canadian Football League. Like, that's worth something there. So you got OC, passing game coordinator, QB coach, and then they also have two extra offensive assistants to work with the quarterbacks and receivers, Robbie Picasso and Ryan Griffin. Ryan Griffin, former NFL quarterback, undrafted out of Tulane in 2013. Didn't play much in the NFL, but like at least is a former quarterback who has been through some of these things too. So like this Bears coaching staff has like 5 coaches dedicated to the quarterback position in some way, shape, or form. Like, yes, your offensive coordinator is not, I guess, dedicated purely to the quarterback position, but like you've got OC, passing game coordinator, QB coach, and then like 2 extra offensive assistants that are working around the quarterback and around the passing game. That is a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and maybe you could argue too many cooks in the kitchen, but I don't know that we can definitively say that and determine that from the outside here. But I think the Bears can sit there and say, okay, we've got a bunch of great coaching staff support for him. We got Tyson, who's played some games. We got Brett, who got a head start on this offense before everyone else, and he's been in some other teams. Like, that can be enough. I don't think this is going to, if the Bears don't sign a veteran backup quarterback, I don't think it's going to limit the number of games they win this season, for example. I think a veteran quarterback could maybe partially help accelerate Caleb's development and just be a better insurance policy for Caleb's development. But like having Brian Hoyer in your quarterback room is not the difference between Caleb having a Hall of Fame career and Caleb being a bust, right? Like, it's a very small factor in all of this. But like we talked about, the number one priority is Caleb Williams' development. It's priorities 1 through 10. And so if having a veteran quarterback can add 1% better to that or 5% better to that, like, that seems, there's not really a lot of downside to me, except for maybe a little bit of Tyson Bagent's development, I guess. But like, that seems to be a worthy, and like a small amount of salary cap space, sure. But those seem to be worthy sacrifices. If it could have any kind of positive impact on Caleb, that is the most important thing. So if I were in charge of this team, and certainly I'm not, and I'm not pretending to be smarter than an NFL general manager ever, but I would think it would make a lot of sense to still pursue a veteran quarterback in free agency. I don't think they will. I don't think it's the end of the world, but it is a good way of also looking at this backup quarterback situation as we enter Chicago Bears training camp, just like a week away now as we approach. Rookies are reporting soon, and before you know it, we'll be ramped back up to a full 5 days a week here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So you got to make sure you hit that subscribe button so you're keeping up with all of our in-depth Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We appreciate you tuning in every time that you do. We hope you keep coming back, because every time you tune into the Locked On Bears podcast, I always want to make sure that I give you another opportunity to bear down.